Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Failure Effect, a show about reclaiming the word failure and turning it into success. My name is Wayu Amuli and I am your host. And without further ado, I would love to introduce you to this week's guest. He is a gentleman that I think we all would know. And if you do not know, then you should know. His name is Joram Mwinamo. He is the CEO of a one stop business services shop called Sandbox. So if you're struggling with your startup, you don't know where to find lawyer services, you don't know how to market, you're trying to avoid KRA,
Mhm.
this is the gentleman to talk to and he will sort you out. Welcome to the show, Jor.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a huge pleasure to be here.
Right. And I
Yeah.
am so glad that you've made the time because your story is fascinating. I mean, you help other entrepreneurs entrepreneur, but
Yes.
then that's because you've gone through your own challenges being an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
And you are a mental health advocate because this entrepreneurial journey has given you some severely triggering episodes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I've been through that journey myself.
Hmm.
And I didn't talk about it for a long time,
Right.
but now it's gotten to a place where I'm at least comfortable enough having that conversation
Hmm.
because a large part of that entrepreneur journey, it was very difficult. And so I've had times when I have completely broken down into clinical depression
Wow.
in that journey. I'm one of those who I was employed for a very, very short time, about 3 years.
Hmm.
And so I've been a full time entrepreneur from 2007. I think we're headed towards 16, 17 years
Oh my
of
goodness.
running businesses.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I have a lot I can say about entrepreneurship, the journey,
Wow.
and I've also, my business at some point turned towards helping entrepreneurs not make the same mistakes we went through that made it very difficult,
Hmm.
and so we were able to package solutions and services that help people avoid those same mistakes that we went through,
Hmm.
and so that's why I've been through the journey myself, but I've also coached hundreds of entrepreneurs and just gotten to see a lot
Hmm.
about what can help a business succeed or fail. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this journey has also had its effect on your marriage. You've been married for
15 years.
15 years with
Yeah.
4 children.
Yes.
And it hasn't been easy. I can imagine your wife supporting. And this is an important conversation that we need to have is the
Yes.
impact of this journey
Mm.
on your intimate relationships because it does have an impact.
Yes.
Hmm.
We actually did a study together with my wife
Hmm.
because it had been very difficult on both our marriage, our parenting, just the pressures that come with having a family.
Hmm.
And so one time we just decided, why not do a survey and see, are we the only ones
Uh-huh.
going through a really difficult time? And we actually got quite a number of people to respond, and they were also very curious about the feedback.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, we ended up getting a study out
Uh-huh.
on entrepreneurship and marriage.
Right.
The results were not very encouraging.
Uh-huh. Okay. Is it tending towards the divorce side or the side of,
Divorce,
oh
breakup,
gosh.
families going bankrupt, losing property,
Yeah.
losing everything they've worked for.
Hmm.
I think majority of the respondents actually said that entrepreneurship had a negative effect on their marriage and
Right.
family life. We had people responding and saying, I wish my first wife hung around long
Hmm.
enough to see the success of the business, which
Mm.
means, it's in their second marriage that the
Yeah.
success came through.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, we just realized a lot of things during that conversation
Yeah.
that first, the couples usually jump in with a lot of optimism.
Hmm.
In many cases, one is employed, and then the other one is the one running the business.
Yeah.
And but what we realize that they both jump in with a lot of optimism that this will take a really short time and the business will be thriving.
Hmm.
So you find even the employed person taking loans on behalf of the business
Yeah.
because they are credit worthy, the entrepreneur is not.
Hmm.
And then things go south, and then what do? You've
Yeah.
lost the money that was taken on the employment side, everything goes south, or it takes 7, 10, 15 years for the business to take off. And they were
Okay.
expecting that it was going to happen in 2 to 3 years. And so you just find that because they had the wrong expectations, it gets very difficult to
Yeah.
sustain that relationship. Yeah.
My word. Okay, so 10, 7:10. I will proceed to dust off my CV and get back into the job market.
Yeah.
But let's talk about where you started because you started off pretty early, right?
Yes, yes. Right out of campus,
Uh-huh.
we registered Wild International,
Mm-hmm.
which went through a lot of iterations
Mm-hmm.
before we found what we felt we could do into the long term. But what had generally happened is that we set out as a youth leadership consultancy.
Mm-hmm.
It was a side hustle, I think,
Mm-hmm.
for the first 3 years.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to have the opportunity. I worked outside the country in Uganda and in Norway for
Mm-hmm.
some time. But my co founder was here. It's called David. And so I think we were very early in the day. So there was very little money in that space
Uh-huh.
at that
Uh-huh.
time. And so the business went pivoting. We went in, then became a corporate training company. Faced some regulatory challenges where we couldn't find some certification. And I think that was just around the time for post election violence as well,
Ah,
2007. And so, in the struggles of building that business, we had to just get innovative and really rethink how we were running the business because a certain certification we couldn't get.
yeah.
One of the values that has driven us in the background has always been doing business with integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular case, we suspect that people wanted us to grease hands so that we get that certification
Of course.
because we could see people with much less requirements than us having that certification, but we would jump through hoops to try and get everything possible
Mm-hmm.
and would still not be given. Would,
Mm-hmm.
have goalposts always being shifted. You don't have this, you don't have this, you don't have that. And so as a result, we couldn't do any corporate training for a very long time, and we could just see our business declining and declining and declining.
Yeah.
And so we had to get creative, and the creativity was around, were there spaces we could play in with competencies we had that did not require this certification or were not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that answer ended up being helping organizations with their structure, their strategy, because that was in the management consulting field, which is until today not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to pivot into that and
Mm-hmm.
start helping businesses. We just realized there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are brilliant with the technical aspects of what they do.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the business aspects that surround the technical aspects,
Mm-hmm.
one, it's very overwhelming because no one prepares you to know that you'll need to understand accounting, you'll need to understand marketing, you'll need to understand taxes,
Mm-hmm.
HR,
Yeah.
recruiting the right people and working with the right people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people get overwhelmed by all those business aspects because here I was a technical expert at what I did, but now I have to manage people, I have to manage a business, I have to manage clients, I have to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not prepared for all those things.
Yeah.
And so we began to package content and tools and methodologies that would just help entrepreneurs to at least be forewarned on some of these things and
Yes.
like our own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so we created programs around that,
Mm-hmm.
uh, partnered with specialist consultants in areas like sales, legal, accounting, and the like, and would run a joint program around that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting that that pivot is what eventually ended up getting our business to take off.
Mm.
Because then we realized there was literally thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs running businesses, but very clueless on all the business aspects. And so, as they came into our program and learned, oh, this is how you structure the business, this is what strategy is, this is what taxes are, this is what legal is, this is what brand is.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go back and put these things in place for their businesses. Then they would just see improvements. They would see the business growing, they're becoming more visible,
Mm-hmm.
building better products and services, and then
Mm-hmm.
they would attract better clients or get more referrals.
Right.
And so, as we worked with different entrepreneurs, we would actually see their businesses begin to grow in leaps and bounds because we just unlock the next level of growth for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we would have businesses grow 5, 10, 20 times over what they were before. And so we realized that, we were onto something just in terms of helping
Mm-hmm.
Kenyan businesses grow. In fact, I remember the tagline at the time was from one-man shows or one-woman shows to multinationals because we're like,
Wow.
why aren't Kenyans building, big
Yeah.
businesses that can grow and scale and become regional businesses?
Mm.
And so, as we help them unlock that growth. Would see people grow, open businesses in Uganda,
Mm-hmm.
Tanzania, Ghana,
Mm-hmm.
Rwanda. And then, yeah, we became clear that, Africans can build great
Yeah.
businesses. Of course, word would get around about our program, our services, and the like. And so we'd have more and more people coming. And so by the time we actually retired that program, because we changed the model down the line when we set up Sandbox, we had trained over 700 businesses in Nairobi, and they would pay to come for the services and stuff. So that's why I'm like, I've seen everything when it comes to entrepreneurship: success, failure.
Yes.
Yeah, we've seen it all.
So I will tell you this, over the course of the last few episodes, every entrepreneur that I have spoken to has talked about two things: being auctioned, right?
Hmm.
That seems like a staple. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the other thing that they've talked about is problems with partnership,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you, let's start with the whole partnership angle. What's your experience with that?
It's funny that I help businesses, and I even help people craft partnerships and make their partnerships work. But I've been in, is it four failed partnerships?
Aha.
Um, because one, my co-founder, that didn't work around 2012. We had to go our separate ways.
What happened?
If you remember, so there's a special relationship between my entrepreneurship journey and election years.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
and 2012 was, just on the cusp of another election year.
Mm-hmm.
And things were really, really difficult then. So, we had done our best to just try and get the business going. But as happens in Kenya every 5 years, during election years, everything just slows down. People stop making decisions.
Yeah.
People stop buying. Nobody invests in anything new. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were in that situation where our business had gotten to a place where it was struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It could not support the both of us at that time. We're having a lot of challenges just keeping things going. And so my co-founder for Wild International was someone we were very close friends. I mean, we had been friends from the time we were like 12 years old.
Wow.
So we had a much stronger personal relationship than business relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes business relationship calls for tough decisions,
True.
calls for, sacrifice, calls for just so many things
Mm-hmm.
that could end up affecting the personal relationship.
True.
And so we're both married at the time, I think very young families, and, just pressure to keep things going. And I think through those challenges, it started to become very clear that the business couldn't support both of us.
Mm-hmm.
We were both struggling on making money, and of course, with election years, you can't even speed up anything. You just have to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started to have tough conversations around, is this working? Can it work? Um, I think he increasingly reflected and just figured out, okay, he could leave. And I think at the point at which he communicated to me that he was thinking about leaving, um, I think maybe up until that point, both of us were thinking this is not working. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe we shut down and go and do other things.
Yeah.
And I remember even at that time, there's a time I'd taken a short-term contract that was almost like employment,
Mm-hmm.
just to keep things going and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But yeah, so when he decided he was leaving, I think as I was reflecting through that, I was like, okay, when I'm by myself, the costs are a lot lower. Maybe I can keep the company going. And somebody else had also requested if they could join us.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to that person, and they are now the current CEO of Wild International.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we had the difficult conversation about him leaving. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
I think for both of us,
Mm-hmm.
because we've reflected on it later. We are still very good friends
Yes.
until today. But for like 2 years, I don't think we talked much or
Yeah.
discussed that situation for a while. But I think when we came back like 2 years later and looked back, we both agreed it was for the best,
Mm-hmm.
for the directions both our careers had taken.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we were able to just talk things through and realize, okay, it was a difficult time when we were going through it, but it was for the best down the line, for the direction that we were going to take. So yeah, so that was my first experience, having to go separate ways
Mm-hmm.
with a business partner. The funny thing is that for me, it made me very carefree after that, because after
Okay.
that, I was like, if that relationship didn't work out and that was like my closest friend,
Yeah.
then there is no other relationship in the world
Yeah.
that is guaranteed to work. So
Uh-huh.
I became very carefree, and I'm like, I would try out partnerships quickly and just fail quickly through it. So after that, there was another. So the gentleman called Chris who joined us,
Mm-hmm.
who joined me at the time, were able to go through the election year, rebuild the business,
Mm-hmm.
and it kept growing. And even when I left the business, he's the one who took over as CEO, and he
Mm-hmm.
was able to run it. But together with Chris, we tried to admit two other partners, did not work out within 6 months. We moved on quickly, and like I said, I don't catch feelings about partnerships not working anymore. And even down the line, we tried another partnership. So one worked, another one did not work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm like, don't take it so seriously. Like it's not a marriage till death do you part. I have things I would look out for now, like do you
Yes.
have shared vision or shared values?
Uh-huh.
For me, those are the two most important things. In fact, do you have shared values?
Mm-hmm.
Because vision you can work on together.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't agree on values,
Mm-hmm.
don't be in a partnership. And then if it's not working out,
Mm-hmm.
and even when people come and say, "Oh, I want to get into a business partnership," I'm like, discuss divorce before you discuss marriage.
Right.
Like, what will you do if things don't work out, go
Yeah.
south, and that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like discuss the negative, because people tend to discuss partnerships based on all the positives
Yes.
and how it works out, how you're going to split the millions when they come. But you don't discuss the tough times when there's no
Mm-hmm.
money.
Mm-hmm.
What will you do?
Mm-hmm.
So nowadays, I'm like, discuss all the deal breakers
Mm-hmm.
before you discuss what would make it work. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a relationship, actually, like a marriage. I mean,
it
it's the
does.
same thing. Okay,
It does.
so
Yeah.
how do you know? What are the signs that tell you that this is not because you might agree on values, for
Yes.
example,
Yeah.
and then along the way you realize no, there are other factors. One of the things that I've had people say is I got into business with someone who has the same skill that I do,
Mm.
so now we're both creatives, so we have no technical,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Person. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the signs?
Um, Nowadays, I actually advocate for don't get someone like you. Like get
Hmm.
someone complementary
Yeah.
to yourself, because I think the older I've grown in entrepreneurship, the more I have come to admit that as a human being, you have strengths and you have weaknesses.
Hmm.
So don't get someone who has the same strengths as you. Get someone who complements your weaknesses,
Hmm.
because you'll quickly realize if you're too outgoing, sanguine type of personalities, who's looking into the details, who's
Hmm.
looking into the operations, who is, dealing with the nitty-gritty. So I myself am the visionary, outgoing, strategic type.
Hmm.
If you ask me about big picture and all sorts of things, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I'm very clear.
Hmm.
My number two or my partner has to be detail oriented, strong in operations,
Hmm.
you know, has to be able to just handle the back end,
Yeah.
because that's not my strength.
Yeah.
And so you'd realize that if you get into a partnership where you're very similar, there are a lot of things that will probably uh, fall through the cracks.
Hmm.
And similarly, if you are the detail oriented and that kind of person, then get someone who's outgoing, visionary, and
Hmm.
relationship oriented or something of a sort.
Hmm.
So it's about looking for someone complementary.
Yeah.
um, I don't know, how do you know things are not working? I think if you're increasingly just having hard conversations around things that you don't agree on in the
Hmm.
business, and it's
Hmm.
impacting the bottom line of the business. Because I don't think it matters the kind of partner you have. You're going to fight. It doesn't
Okay.
matter how much you get along, you're going to fight.
Okay.
But if your fights are not ending up in resolution of issues
Yeah.
and finding a better way of dealing with that issue in future,
Hmm.
then maybe that relationship is doomed towards, failure.
Okay.
And I keep telling people, just build a culture of confronting brutal facts.
Hmm.
As business people, sales are declining, they're declining. Don't fight about it.
Hmm.
Those are the facts.
Hmm.
Ask, why are they declining? Are we not building enough sales capacity? Do we both need to be involved in this? Or did you come in this business thinking you're not going to sell and I'm going to do all the sales? Have those hard conversations.
Right.
Because I can tell you, in almost 100% of business partnerships that don't discuss issues fail. I can
Okay.
guarantee you.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to build a healthy culture of discussing the tough issues.
Yeah.
But maybe being mature enough that you can fight, but after that you can go have coffee, you can have drinks,
Mm-hmm.
and life
Yeah.
goes on. You don't
Yeah.
take it, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go directly to mental health
Hmm.
and the impact that this business has had
Yeah.
on yourself personally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So I think for me, the first time that I got the sense something was really wrong was when during post-election violence, because I'd had an episode
Mm-hmm.
of depression, but this was when I was working in Norway, and
Mm-hmm.
in that country you have
Like zero
times when it's
sunshine.
dark for almost 18 to 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was weather related. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought when I come back home, everything would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I came back, and I think almost 6 months later is when we had a post election violence in 2007. And so after that, I started to feel prolonged anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
which was unusual. And then after the prolonged anxiety, I just sank into like
Mm-hmm.
complete sadness,
Okay.
again prolonged for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I began to realize, no, this isn't normal. Something is not right here. And so after that began a very long journey of first I went to a general practitioner, and he's like, hey, the symptoms you're describing, I think you need to see a specialist psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
I've been through a lot of psychiatrists in this city because I realized you need your chemistry with your psychiatrist needs to work
Yes.
if your healing is going to work down the
Mm-hmm.
line. And so, started off a journey trying to find one whom I felt the relationship was not commercial, because
Mm-hmm.
earlier I felt, my wife had a good cover that covered both of us. And I just felt I was being pumped with medicines, and
Mm.
nothing much was, being thought through around it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that started an almost 13-year journey
Mm-hmm.
into working with therapists, taking medication
Yeah.
for the depression. And, this entire time I've been an entrepreneur. So, I mean, anyone who's run a business will tell you it. You always feel like you're carrying a very heavy load
Yeah.
throughout. And so there'd be a lot of uh, times. And if you look at that timeline, 2007, so 2012, it means like when I was going separate ways with my partner, I was dealing with depression.
Mm-hmm.
By 2017, there was another,
Yeah.
election period. Again, dealt with. So within every time when business would become difficult, I would probably have triggers and then get sink into depression again and have to climb out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe go through intense medication and therapy
Mm-hmm.
to climb out of it as we were building the different businesses that we were doing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say almost throughout my entire entrepreneurship career, I've also had, a period where I was going through dealing with clinical depression and going through treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I had to learn a lot along the way, because my business was in the can you call it intellect space, where we're helping people
Yeah.
with strategy. You have to do reports, you have to, facilitate workshops and do all these sessions. And in the background,
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with this darkness, dark cloud that's hanging over you. So I'd have uh, like intense periods of one fear,
Yeah.
because in Kenya you have the stigma around mental health, and so there's a fear of, if my clients find out
Yeah.
I'm dealing with a mental health issue, will they still continue to trust and give us work?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are periods when you're right in the middle of a lot of hard work, and you have proposals to do, you have reports to do,
Mm.
but your mind is just not working. Like you're
Yes.
seated in front of that laptop for probably hours, but you're
Mm-hmm.
not able to move.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in all those periods, I had to figure out just ways of coping,
Mm-hmm.
because it definitely impacts a business. I've always been the CEO. It
Mm-hmm.
definitely impacts how quickly the business moves,
Mm-hmm.
because there are times when there are tough decisions to be made. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're down in the dumps and you have tough decisions to make, in fact, you're probably down in the dumps because of that tough decision to
Yeah.
make. How do you build the courage? How do you build what it takes to make that tough decision?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I had to, especially working with my therapist, I had to learn a lot of coping mechanisms. There are times when I just couldn't work, and now I had to first I had to disclose to my business partner, look, I'm going through this issue.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be times I can't work at all. You
Mm-hmm.
need to step in and keep things going.
Yeah.
And he would. He was very understanding, and in many times I would just come and tell, "Hey, dude, I think I'm going into a period where things are going to be thick." He's like, "You don't worry, I've got this." He would step in,
Mm-hmm.
take over. Maybe it's an assignment with a client. I would maybe physically show up for the meeting, but he would maybe facilitate or drive the meeting or whatever it
Yeah.
is. So, like, those are the things that I would have to do in the background to
Mm-hmm.
just keep things going. In fact, there are many people who listen to this podcast and they'll be very shocked
Aha.
that that entire period we were doing assignments with them, that I was actually dealing with a mental health issue,
Uh-huh.
because people have never seen it. Like, we found, or I can say I became very good at masking and, you know, hiding it from clients, hiding it from general populace. People come to Sandbox and they're like, this entire period you've been dealing with depression and you've built
Yeah.
this large business. It's very surprising to them.
Mm-hmm.
For others, I think it's very inspiring that you
Mm-hmm.
could still go through those issues, find ways of coping, heal, and still build something amazing. But I would actually say also in the coaching of those many entrepreneurs, and maybe it's why I was very empathetic to a lot of them, I found out that maybe 30% of those who'd come for coaching or for help with their business,
Mm-hmm.
the real fundamental thing they were dealing with was a mental health issue. And they
Yes.
didn't know,
Yeah.
because we are very unaware of sometimes the symptoms or what it is that
Mm-hmm.
is holding you back. So someone just thinks they're burnt out, or thinks, they're just sad or something, but they don't realize that the
It's
underlying thing that's slowing them down in the background is
is
actually a mental health issue. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I mean, because I'm thinking, the symptoms of like clinical depression, because you've got anxiety,
Mm,
yes, which can
mm,
hold you back in a social setting,
mhm,
but then you've also got irritability,
mhm, mm,
and then you've got you're reclusive. You
mhm.
can't stand to be around people.
Yep.
You can't even stand to be around yourself,
Mhm.
So even like waking up and taking a shower, I believe I've said this on the show before,
Mm.
can often seem like a task. It's those little
Yes,
things. How
yes,
did you
yes, yes,
handle
yes.
it?
Uh, uh, I think dealing with depression is probably one of the things that has communicated to me that I'm a fighter. Like, I fight because I hear many other people's accounts of what
Mm-hmm.
they had to deal with. I don't remember a single time in that history, even say when I didn't feel like getting out of bed and whatever, I would get out of bed, shower, change, and just go to the office. I'd rather go and sit there the whole day and do nothing. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not staying at home and sleeping. Like,
Okay.
that was my way of fighting and saying this thing is going to go on, come what may.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd just figure out, uh, building one, support structures, and then building routines
Mm-hmm.
that just keep things going.
Okay.
Where I'm like, I'll go to the office. If all I do is one thing, that's the one thing I'll do for that day, and I'll go home and say, look, at
Mm-hmm.
least I kept things going. But I would fight that urge to just sit back and stay in bed and, keep the curtains closed and that kind of thing. I
Yeah.
would really fight that urge. It would then mean that for most weekends, Saturday, I would be completely gone, like beat. So most
Mm-hmm.
Saturdays I would be completely asleep. In fact, I remember at some point it was a problem with my family, because the weekends when I should be spending with them is when I am completely gone and I can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But then also it made me like look for every possible solution. Like, I tried so many things. I
Yeah.
tried alternative medicine. I
Uh-huh.
tried so many things just to find a solution for, if there's something that can make this thing work, I'm going to find whatever that answer is.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I did realize that, yes, there are different types of medication that work different ways with our physiology. So
Mm-hmm.
I kept fighting to figure out better and
Yeah.
better
Mm-hmm.
medications that would work better with me,
Mm-hmm.
that I wouldn't have terrible side effects.
Yeah.
And then I realized that psychotherapy, like, just makes a huge difference. Like, medicine alone
Mm-hmm.
is not enough.
Yeah.
And so that's what even just led to looking for therapists who believed in both, because
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the world of medicine, there are people who are more medicine driven, there are others who are more psychotherapy driven.
Yeah.
And then there are some who believe in both because maybe they've studied both. So
Mm-hmm.
whoever I eventually ended up working with had studied both and believed in both, and signed me up for both. So it'd be like, okay, you need to take this medication,
Yeah.
but from next Monday, come back and see Dr. whoever, and she'll help you through the coping mechanisms to help build back. So I did that for quite a while, and would see very immediate, like feedback loops on getting better. My therapist would help me uh, like tie back to what's causing me to get depressed. For example, it may be an issue at work, it may be an issue at home, it may be an issue with a relative, it may be an issue that happened when I was 16. And,
Yeah.
so she would help me unravel all those things. And I just saw a very gradual, improvement. Um, because I think it's very interesting, and this might be the case with a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, we are very high energy people. So in my depression, I am still more productive than the average human being.
Okay.
So you can imagine the speed I move at when I am completely okay,
Well,
and how crazy it can drive people.
yeah, yeah.
And even with that, now there's a problem of me now managing myself not to drive people crazy or kill them, because I feel like they're moving too slowly. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
meanwhile, so you're going through all of this, right? Business is obviously going through its phases,
Mhm.
and then you've got your bouts of depression,
Mhm.
and your wife
Mm.
is the one in employment. How did she handle all of this? Because let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I know a lot of women who would have quit very early on in the
Yes.
day. Yeah.
So yeah, that just had its dynamics in terms of, especially as a family grew. Like I mentioned, 4 kids, and uh, that's not a very light thing to be able to manage. I think maybe early on, there's a time I would say maybe I was in denial about the treatment, but at the point at which I got to the place where I accepted the situation and decided, okay, we're going to go through this path of treatment and therapy, and that's what will help me get better. I think she was also quick maybe to catch on it and realize that she needed to support that process if I was going to get better. But it's that going through the treatment doesn't mean that the dynamics of going through a time when the business is not hardly making any money, or going through problematic times, or dealing with a lot of debt. There'd be months when I cannot bring anything home at all. And so that requires for her to step up and step in and cover for some of the things, because the way we manage our finances, there's things I manage, there's things she manages.
Yeah.
And so when I'm not able to manage the things on my side, it would mean that she has to step in. And I think even culturally, sometimes it's just a struggle in Kenya from
Yeah.
cultural background, where maybe we grew up in settings where it's our parents, the dad was the one who catered for everything and the mom supported. And then you get into a scenario where, there are occasions when the wife has to step in and actually carry the day as you support.
Yeah.
And there are just a lot of dynamics there around dealing with ego, dealing with, am I doing the best I can at work to make sure that I'm, bringing my contribution here. And so, yeah, so I think, as we were also dealing with the dynamics of getting treated, that we also had to deal with the dynamics of then, okay, how do we also keep the marriage going through all these challenges, the
Yeah.
hard conversations. On her side, it's probably issues of how long is this dream going to take before it
Yeah.
takes off.
Yeah.
It's already been long enough. It's been many years. And that there have been times when things look good and money has come in, and we are actually able to, like, I think there was a time maybe around that 2012 or thereabouts, 2014 is when I remember we maybe became quite profitable. And there would be money that would be able to come, and we can take that out and maybe buy some land or some property or something. And it's good, but then we sink back almost immediately
Yeah.
as we
Yeah.
head towards 2017
Yeah.
into times when there is no money at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's those dynamics of good times, bad times, and you know, on their end, on her end, she's probably wondering, is this thing ever going to get to the place where it's working consistently and properly and without any issues? Should this guy get a job? Because, with my credentials, there's probably many places I could get a job as a director.
True.
And those struggles of not having money go away completely,
Yeah.
or so we think. But anyway, so there are those times when we would just have those very tough conversations around, is it time for me to, call it quits and just go and do something substantial under employment, um, or uh, or the like. In fact, I remember when was this? Around 2019 is when we were fortunate enough now to be able to raise money to set up the sandbox. And it was a substantial amount. And so we were now going through the process of designing how the sandbox is going to look and everything. And I remember a funny episode when I came home with the renderings of what the space was going to look like. And I showed my wife, and then I could see the shock in her face for, you've actually been telling me about this thing since 2012.
Right.
But now is when I can see it's coming to fruition, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so maybe up until that time, it was just a dream,
Yeah.
you know, to her. But then she could finally see, okay, so this guy is not crazy. These things he talks about actually comes to pass. And I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs who go through that, because for the entrepreneur, it's a very clear vision in your mind. Like, we had been working on this thing, you know, how it was going to work, how we're going to grow into it. And then finally the resources come all at once,
Yeah.
and we're able to set it up
Yeah.
from its very ideal nature. The day we launched the sandbox, you know, it was quite a buzz where the whole city just got to know, oh, this new thing is in town. When it was up and running, we realized it's the only thing of its kind around the world. So we've gotten so much attention from people around the world wanting to do the same thing. But you see, up until it was up and running, it was probably sounding like just a pipe dream or something of a sort. So yeah, so there just has to be those things of you as entrepreneur, you're encouraging yourself, because sometimes even your family is not seeing what it is that you're saying. And so you're in that space all by yourself. They are probably thinking you're crazy and all sorts of things. And then they see evidence of something that's working. And then they're like, okay, maybe he's not so crazy after all. So I'm sure there's a lot of people going through that. And then, of course, in that process, you've also had stories
Yes.
that, like you mentioned, of those ones that went south completely. Auctioneers came and cleaned out the house, took the car and everything. Like, you keep hearing such stories. So even for you, the entrepreneur, there are times when you sit down and you're like, maybe everyone else is right, and I'm the one who's crazy to think that this thing is possible. Yeah.
Did you ever come close to getting auctioned?
We have had auctioneers come to my door.
Okay.
Yeah,
What
even
happened?
quite fairly recently.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So, like you said, it's a rite of passage.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, we've definitely had that. Again, election year, business is dwindling. Our clients are unable to pay. You're accumulating rent, and yeah, you get that, you know, dreaded demand letter
Yeah.
that comes from your landlord's lawyer saying, look, you're behind on X, and if you don't act within the next X number of days, we are going to send these guys to come. And so, yeah, we had the auctioneers come, you know, go around valuing all the stuff that is in our office.
Oh, this was office, not house.
Yeah,
Okay.
office. Yeah, in the office. Yeah, you have to be smart and
Yeah.
run a limited entity so that your personal effects are not
This is true. Yeah.
part of this. But yeah, and then they now give you a date by which, if you've not cleared, they are going to come back and clean up everything. So of course we got into a frenzy and trying to get every possible form of financing we could, just to start making things right. Got into a payment plan with landlord. So thankfully we were able to keep up that payment plan. Although, you know, we were harassed a little bit more beyond that. But yeah, because, you know, rent continues coming. It doesn't stop. But yeah, that was definitely a harrowing time, just for us to go through that experience together with my co-directors. And of course, on the back end of such happenings, you're also going back and asking yourself hard questions around, why isn't this business working as it should? Just one of the key things I've concluded out of all election years that I need to be doing business outside Kenya. Yeah, so that when Kenya slows down and things are not moving, at least we have contracts where we're doing things, you know. So we've learned ways of coping as well, or thinking and innovating. And it's part of the reason why, as I run Sandbox, I'm very aggressive around this needs to be a multinational business. Let me deal with 5 election cycles, but they're not all happening in the same year. So when this country slows down, we're at least making money from this other one, and things don't come to a complete standstill.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how soon or how far
Are
away
we
are you
from
from
that whole
expanding? Yeah.
conversation? Yeah. So as it is already, like with Wild International, we already do regional projects. We have projects running in Rwanda,
Mm-hmm.
TZ, Uganda. We have certain clients from Kenya who give us work in several different countries.
Okay.
Also, as a result, we are looking to set up in Ethiopia, and we
Mm-hmm.
do also have conversations outside of Kenya. In the US, in Atlanta, we have conversation going on in Pakistan for a franchise for the Sandbox. Yeah, so we've been welcoming people who want to set up the same thing through a different model, of course,
Mm-hmm.
where they'll probably be paying us a franchise and royalty, but we enable them to set up and run the entity.
Right.
That desire has also just made me very keen every time I travel to try and find out the local dynamics around, okay, what's the rent per square foot in this city?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to consultants and experts in those cities and ask them, if we set up something like this, would you be interested? How much would you pay? So I do a lot of market research every time I'm traveling,
Yeah.
just to see. And I think where things stand is that it's almost in every other location. If we're to set up one, Nairobi is a very, very competitive city. People don't realize how much. I think the only people who compete with us is probably Lagos and Cairo.
Mm-hmm.
Even South Africa is not as competitive as we are. And so you realize that when you go to other jurisdictions, either you'll be the only one doing that kind of thing, and so there's a
Right.
lot of opportunity,
Uh-huh.
or you're also in a jurisdiction where the purchasing power is a lot higher. So Europe, the US, when I try and test out some of the pricing,
Mm-hmm.
I realize people are willing to pay many more times than what we are getting here in Kenya.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it's become a very firm strategy just for us to make sure we lock down a few and start earning in dollars so
Wow.
that even as the dollar gets stronger, you're not worried.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you
You're
actually
hedged
celebrate
against
you.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness. I mean, you're a master class in entrepreneurship, like for real. But
Yeah.
I have one final question.
Mm,
Um, what advice do you have for an entrepreneur who's starting out and they feel like everything is falling apart,
mm.
as we all feel like it happens?
Yeah. I think not just even those starting out, even those who've been in the journey for a long time, because I
Hmm.
think at different points of that entrepreneurial journey, you'll always have to have a meeting with yourself as
Yeah.
to, is this working?
Hmm.
Do I have what it takes to make this work? What I've found as I've grown older is that I'm a lot more comfortable admitting my failures and where
Hmm.
I'm just not making things work, and
Hmm.
asking hard questions around, who can I talk to? Where can I get help
Yeah.
to turn this situation around? And that's why you find, like, it just rolls off my lips. I'm quick to say, are you facing a mental health issue? Get a therapist ASAP. Don't even waste time. Don't even ask yourself questions as to whether you should talk to them. Like, no, go into that session like yesterday.
Hmm.
Are you having issues with business, with accounting, with operations? Like, get the expert in that area. Like, don't waste time trying to figure it out by yourself,
Hmm.
because there's so much to figure out that I'm just like, even I get coaches. Like, I'm a coach, but I get coaches to
Yeah.
help me figure out my business, to help
Yeah.
me stay accountable with things that maybe I'm taking too long to make a decision. I'm very quick to suggest that. So I'm just like, I tell guys, get over yourself. Like, yes, there's all these things that encourage people to want to feel like heroes, when it comes to building a business. But yeah, heroes die quickly.
Okay.
Like, just
Yeah.
seek help quickly, seek somebody who can advise you, seek a mentor, seek seek every sort of person who can help you. So
Hmm.
nowadays I'm very quick to get help on just different issues, and I've found out there's a lot of people just willing to help. Some of it you'll pay for, it's fine. Invest, pay for the therapy services, pay for the coaching services. Don't try to figure this thing out alone. It's very difficult. Yeah.
Okay. I know I said final question, but now I'm curious. What
Yeah.
so what happens if you're totally bootstrapping it and you know that these are services that you need but you
Yeah.
can't afford?
No, I mean, just be creative around it.
Okay.
You need legal services. Find a relative or a friend who's a lawyer,
Uh-huh.
and ask. them to help you pro bono or something.
Yeah.
Like just get creative around
Mhm.
finding that help, but then at the end of the day, get the help. Get creative around keeping your costs very low.
Mhm.
Don't keep that office if you don't need to.
Yeah.
Don't drive that big car if you don't need to, where you're spending a lot on fuel. Like
Mhm.
just get creative around, making things work, and,
Mhm.
and and getting that help. So I think it requires a lot of maybe personal maturity, because some of these things are, when you do them, uh, there may be questions from friends and relatives,
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
to why are you downgrading your lifestyle? Why is this changing? Why all those things going on? So I think it calls for you building just a lot of personal maturity as you deal with some of these things, as you make the hard decisions,
Mhm.
as you make the transitions, yeah, but in many of those times answers exist. It just depends on how keen are you to find those answers,
Mhm.
and then when you find them, also execute, because
Yeah.
sometimes we take too long before we make that hard decision, and in the meantime we are hemorrhaging, we are struggling, we are going through this. Yeah, so yeah, do whatever it can to turn the situation around.
Mhm.
And then I guess also do a lot maybe to build a support system of fellow entrepreneurs, friends, mentors,
Mhm.
who can just help you sanity check. Are you crazy as you're doing this? Or are you making the right decisions? Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I have a lot to say about this, but we're going to sidebar on that.
Okay.
Right now, I am pretty sure there are a lot of you who are thinking, Guy, we need to meet with Joram right now so he can assist us. I mean, with the possibility of growing your business 5 times in, I don't know, how long would that take? A
Two,
year, two
three
years?
years. Yeah.
In 2, 3 years, my goodness, get in touch. Like, use those social
Yeah.
media handles that you see on the screen in front of you and find him and ask for his help for your business. And on that note, I would like to say goodbye, and we'll see you next week for another one just like this one.